Hey Bubblers, my name is Cameron, and today we're going to be going ahead and going over how we combine multiple data sources into one repeating group using JSON-like syntax and some conditional logic. Because it's text, we can use regex, we can use find and replace, and we can do a whole bunch of cool things to make our life a little bit more easy and simple, and let's go ahead and hop into it and show you. This is an order system page, imagine for like HelloFresh, where next week we're going to be ordering something. We get to see what it's going to be, we might want to change some things, and that's what this page is. We have an order as designated by the unique ID in our URL, and then these are line items, like items that currently exist on our order. So I can change the quantity, and you'll see here the JSON up above, I'm changing the quantity and it's adjusting. And I can also add something. This is a product, a completely different data source. I'll add a product here, and we'll say this product now is on its way to eventually become a line item. The user will be prompted to click Edit Order, and they have the ability to adjust the quantity, as you can see here. Using this JSON, we have the ability to set with that format as text some key or identifying pieces of information. So edit equals yes means that it already exists. We're going to be editing it. If edit equals no, that means obviously we can't edit, we're going to be adding it. So this exists on the back end. We're going to be sending some stuff, doing some stuff with our data. Really exciting, actually cool API tricks that we're about to go over. But this is sort of what we're doing. We click a button and we adjust some JSON. All of this JSON exists, or JSON-like exists as text, and then our repeating group uses these items. Using conditional logic, you can see here we have let's focus on our order item first. So first to note, these look remarkably similar. You can see here, these are two different data sources. We want to provide the illusion that they're the same data source to our end user, right? So keeping our order item, let's take a look at this guy. This is our conditional where we say, hey, let's take a look at that JSON that we have. Does this line item or this item, because we're splitting it, right? This is a repeating group. Does this particular list item have a edit equals yes? And if it does, well, okay, let's go ahead and take some of the data that we've loaded previously. And we load this on page load. We set this here. We load this data here. We say, let's take a look at that data. Let's filter it. Let's go ahead and select the item where the current cell's text, so again, the JSON that we're splitting and loading here, does it contain this state's order item's product unique ID? So some identifying information, that's the product unique ID. And we're going to take its first item and we're going to show that it's visible. And so that's what's happening here. We're looking at this data up above and we're saying, okay, let's find the item in the list that we're loading on page load. Oops, the list that we're loading on page load. Let's go ahead and find its item where the unique ID of this item is the same. And it loads it. And we do something very similar here for our product as well. Does edit equal no? This is different. This is a product. So the data source for this guy is state product, right? For the order item, it's state order item. Different data sources, very similar logic as to how we go ahead and decide what we're going to populate. We use some key piece of information from the JSON that we've loaded, and we're going to go ahead and filter then from our actual data source that item where the unique ID is matching. In this case, I use the unique ID as N, and then I go ahead and extract it with this regex. So real quick, just as a simple overview, and there will be multiple videos, this is just like a topical, what we're doing is on page load, we're sending the person or this user to their order. This is just a demo, first item. You'd have your own sort of architecture set up to facilitate that. But this is what will be similar, is that the second step is going to be you loading the data that you want to go ahead and display. Our order items, this is our search for order items, where the order equals the current page's order. And the products, it's the search for state products, where the unique ID isn't in the list of states products, each item's unique ID, so on. Might have to this filter I don't think is actually that important. But you can obviously only load the items that you want to have loaded. And then turn to text. This is the next step and the most important step, where what you're going to do is you're going to take one of your order items data. We don't want to load it twice. So we just take the previous state that we created and we format it as text here. This is where we're able to say, or at least provide the identifying information and its properties so we can then use it in our visual front end. Note the pipes here. This is so that we can now use this delimiter and then split it by so that each object itself is a line item and not each property. Stay tuned for the next video. It's coming. All right, welcome back to the second video where we're going to be going over why we have it in this kind of syntax and actually how we're going to go ahead and use these properties. We're adding these properties in these JSON objects for a particular reason. How do we go ahead and use them? So because we don't want to go ahead and create a new line item here when they click this button, and instead we want to ensure that it is what they want, we're going to send it to a backend endpoint to do stuff, we need to use an API connector. That is, we need to go ahead and parse this text, and we need to go ahead and turn it into JSON so we get the properties and attributes and then can actually use them in our workflows. What does that look like when we click this edit order button? Well, we're going to go ahead and send our data into an endpoint that we're going to create, and we're going to make it look like this, where we have an order in this object we're sending and then an array of products that we're sending. We're going to go ahead and pass this all back into an endpoint. We're going to get it back as a response, as you can see, result of step one. We're going to pass it back, and then we're actually going to do stuff with it. This is a really cool API trick that not a lot of people know, but you can use your own API to go ahead and send text that's in JSON format and get it back in JSON format, or in a way that you can use it inside your Bubble workflows. Going to our backend actions, we're going to take a look at the states parse endpoint. What is this? This is accepting a key of body and a type of text. That's it. And all we're doing is we're going to return that as itself. That's it. Let's go back to our plugins, and this is our syntax. You can see here when we're going back here. Let's go back to our states. I actually have it here in this JSON lint. This is our structure. We're passing in an order. It's our current page's order ID, and then the products. These are all of the items that we have in that JSON example. This stuff. That's what that is. And I go ahead, and when I click this button, or actually before I even click this button, I need to set up my API endpoint, right? I need to send this data back. So check this out. This is text. I formatted it, I've gotten rid of the pipes, I've added commas, and I've clicked reinitialize, and bang, whoa, that is our data that we can now use just like any other data, a result of step ones, blah, 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 etc. So let's actually show how it works. We are using these pipes. This is not JSON. We need it in JSON syntax. So when we click this button, we're sending it back to our, we're sending it to our endpoint, the one that we just took a look at. We say each item find and replace, find that pipe and replace it with a comma. We send it back, and then of course we get that now result, and this is where it is. This is what we're going to do with it now, is we're going to take our results and we're going to send it to a new backend endpoint, a recursive workflow. So, in most recursive workflows, you probably are used to, well, let's just go back to our recursive workflows real quick, and let's just take a quick, well, let me duplicate this tab. I'm going to duplicate this tab. We'll leave this just like, actually, we'll go to our backend endpoint. Okay, so this is our properties panel. We go ahead and pass in a list of unique IDs, and that's the only list we're actually passing in. Everything else is technically a list, but it's weird with Bubble. It gets rid of duplicates, and oftentimes in your quantity, you're going to have duplicates, and we don't want to get rid of all of those items in our list. Bubble would do it if we start manipulating that list, but it will preserve it if we don't touch that list. So we're just going to pass in a single item, which is still technically a list, but we're not telling Bubble it's a list. And we're passing in a count, and then we're passing in, of course, the order, and then the edit. All of these are texts. For step one, we're saying, does our edit, and check this out, we're splitting by a comma, item number count. This is going to allow us to iterate through items that may be duplicates. We do this for everything. This is how I like to approach it. It's very, very reliable. So we're saying, okay, if edit equals or contains no for this item, item number count, which is going to be passed in as a 1, so item number 1, we're going to add the order, we're going to add the product, and then our quantity will go ahead and do the same thing, the same kind of split by item number count converted to number. Okay, and then we're going to go ahead and do that for if we're editing, and then you guessed it, we're going to go ahead and just increment count and repeat what we're doing. So we send data back into this endpoint once it's formatted as a data that we can use, and then we do stuff with it. Okay, get ready for the next video where we go into the workflows. All right, welcome back to the third video where we're going to be going over the workflow logic, how we actually get it to work, this JSON, how it formats. Okay, this, we know, repeated group, it's text. Well, let's go ahead and take a look at when we click one of these buttons. And we also know that the order item and products, they're existing sort of in the same space. Let's just focus on the line item right now. So when we click on this plus sign, what happens? Well, when we click on this plus sign, we have a custom event. Each of these buttons triggers this custom event. 4 parameters: new quantity, product ID, edit, and old quantity. We use, so when we're on the line item, we say, okay, well, let's trigger this event. That is the quantity it has plus the button click count plus 1. And this is because we need the ability to measure the old quantity and the new quantity. We will be using this button's click count. We'll be setting the state of it, of course, but because we need the new quantity and because we also need the old quantity, we actually just, instead of using the state itself, like having the state sort of like trigger before step 1, we do it here. Okay, and then we go ahead and then set the states after this trigger so that we can then do the old quantity, new quantity again, so on and so forth. In this event, what do? We do 2 things. Well, one of 2 things. First off, does our item exist? This is, does each item's extracted with regex, and this would be looking at the product's unique ID, does it contain or does it not contain the product ID that we're passing in? If it doesn't, then we're plussing the item to the repeating group list. And what item are we plussing? This is our just very similar JSON-like syntax, the exact same actually. We're just taking those parameters. The edit is going to be a yes or no, the quantity is the new quantity, the product ID, that's the product ID. And then, okay, does it exist? The inverse logic, does it exist currently in this list? Well, we're going to go ahead and find that item with the old quantity, and we're going to replace it with the new quantity. That's the idea of how this entire thing works. Now, we are, of course, doing something else with the product. If we're adding it from the product, when we click the add button, what we need to go ahead and do is trigger that function. And then we'll go ahead and set the new quantity to +1. So we still want to go ahead and trigger some custom states. We still want to be smart about it, I guess. Now, why are we, I don't know if that's the right word, smart about it. Well, we just want to have some like kind of like data transaction, like we want to be, that's the word I'm looking for. We want to be able to just make sure we know what we're doing with certain data. Okay, anyway, so then we go ahead and have, let's focus now on this product one where we're going to go ahead and trigger our product if the quantity is empty. So this product has been added to the cart. Now we need to go ahead and affect its quantity. How do we do that? If the quantity is empty, meaning no state has been set on this card, if no state's been set here, well, we need to go ahead and provide some values. We know that if no state's been set, then the new quantity is going to be 2 because it starts at 1, and the old quantity must be 1. We'll go ahead and then say, well, what happens if that quantity is not empty? We have sort of 2 back to back here. Well, in which case we're going to take that product button, and again, because we need to be able to monitor new and old quantity, we'll take that state and then +1. We'll go ahead and do, this is pretty important actually, the quantity. Has this button been clicked? If it has, we'll go ahead and say it's its value. Otherwise, if it hasn't, we'll say it's the first time it's being clicked. We'll provide that quantity of 1. And same for the new quantity. Has this been clicked? If it has, then we'll say it's this click count +1. Otherwise, it's the second click. And then we do something very similar for the last state that we're setting. This button's click count is empty. We're saying, okay, if it is empty, we'll go ahead and make sure that this is the second time we're clicking, or that we're increasing the quantity. This is the first time we're clicking the button, but from 1 to 2, we know that then this needs to be set to 2. And if this is anything other, then it's just this button's click count +1. Weird. Let's go ahead and use a step-by-step real quick and just show us. This is for the line item. We're going to go ahead and add or trigger this. You can see the new quantity is 9, old quantity is 8. We're going to go ahead and go to our list. It does exist. So this is why this only when isn't happening. This does exist. Here's what it looks like, the find and replace. Oops, it's right here, the find and replace. Here's our old and here's our new. And very similar for this logic as well. If we were to go ahead and check, it triggers all of the boxes. This video's been really rushed. I'm super sorry. I only have the 5-minute Loom video. We'll go ahead and combine all of 3 of these into one, and we'll go from there. But hopefully this helps us. All right, peace out.